So if you've watched my channel for any amount of time, you probably know that A, I really like the Yakuza series, and B, I really like doing cool combos in the Yakuza series. I've always enjoyed the feel of these games, as well as the diversity of advanced combat between the different entries in the series. The more I get into it, however, the more I notice the glaring lack of documentation for many of these games' advanced techniques. There's a lot of depth that often goes unexplored by many players, and those who do want to look into it often have a hard time due to a lack of readily available information. Those are the two main reasons I've decided to make this video series, to document and to spread the information about the more advanced combat that the series has to offer. Before getting into things, I need to set some parameters on what exactly this video series will be covering. I will be going over almost every mainline game in this series, including the Kiwami remakes and the Judgments. While some spin-offs may somewhat fit this video, they are often limited by some combination of poor combat depth, altered gameplay, and/or a lack of accessibility. Fist of the North Star Lost Paradise would be a good fit, but it's unfortunately stuck on the PS4. Original Ishin and Kenzan are only in Japanese and are stuck on the PS3, and while the Kiwami remake of Ishin fixes these issues, the combat of the remake is insultingly shallow. The Kurohyou games are only on the PSP and feature a drastically different combat system that would interrupt the flow of the video, and Dead Souls is, well, Dead Souls. I said that almost every mainline game would appear, and you can probably guess, but Yakuza Like a Dragon and Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth will not be in this series due to being RPGs. RPGs are completely different and require a different skill set to be good at. With that out of the way, I also want to denote that while advanced combat can cover many things, this video series will focus on 1v1 combos, as that's far and away the most popular form of advanced play. The complete list of games that will appear in this video series is as follows: Yakuza 1, Yakuza 2, 3, 4, 5, 0, Kiwami, 6, Kiwami 2, Judgment, Lost Judgment and the Kaito Files, Gaiden, and Pirate Yakuza. This part will feature Yakuza 1 through 4. Before every game, I will display a graphic showcasing the game, the combo types the game has to offer, my opinion out of 10 on this game's advanced combat, as well as what I believe to be the general consensus out of 10, and a brief statement on my opinion. Some of these games will also be using footage from other people, either because I don't have easy access to a game or because they're just better than me. Any footage from other people will be denoted in the bottom left, and their channels will be in the description. The general structure for each segment will be a discussion of each of the combo types on offer, a deep dive into the most important moves you will be using, and a list of the best bosses to perform combos on. One final prerequisite that I need to discuss before beginning is the notation that I will be using when discussing certain moves. This applies to the standard combo that you will be using. The community has a bit of a problem when it comes to denoting a specific attack. There are many ways I've seen it written, with the most common being to write out a letter for each input. For example, this attack would be SSSSTT. I think that's a little too much, especially when it comes to saying this notation out loud. So I've decided to use a condensed notation, which would turn this attack into 4S2T. Yakuza was originally a PlayStation exclusive, which is why the community tends to use S and T, standing for square and triangle, which are your light and heavy attack inputs respectively. Sometimes a C may also appear, standing for circle, which is the grab input, and in some very niche scenarios, there may also be an X, which is the quick step input. For example, this would be 2STC, and this would be 3STXT. I will be using this notation for the entire video, and it should be fairly easy to understand. With all that out of the way, I believe it's time to begin. Oh, and by the way, there will be spoilers. So, this game being here is nothing more than a formality. Simply put, this game has nothing in the way of advanced combos. The original Yakuza is a pure scrap fest. The most that this game has that can be loosely considered a combo hinges on 2ST. This is a gut punch that applies a property known as a gut stun, where the enemy holds their gut before slowly crumpling to the ground. Moves with this property will become very important later, but for now, they really only have one quote-unquote advanced use case. A unique property of the gut stun animation in both PS2 games and Lost Paradise for some reason is that if you attack an enemy during a gut stun, they will still be standing. So if you want, hit an enemy with a gut stun, and then keep on attacking, assuming that you're on a boss that has normal hit reactions. Yes, boss properties are an important thing that will be discussed later. That's about as complex as this game gets. The reason for Yakuza 1's lack of advanced combat tech is due to two main things: your overall sluggishness and the lack of a proper cancel. More on that in Yakuza 2. This makes it basically impossible to link more than one combo together. Now, that's not really a problem for this game, as it still plays fine for the most part, apart from the shitty lock-on. It's just that this game is blatantly overshadowed in this aspect compared to its successors. I think it's time to move on to something more substantial. While Yakuza 2 is similarly much shallower than future entries, unlike its predecessor, there is something to talk about here. This game addresses the two main issues from Yakuza 1. Kiryu is much faster in this game, both in his attack speed and overall responsiveness, and he gains an actual animation cancel in the form of the quick-step cancel. For those not in the know, an animation cancel is a term mostly used in fighting game discourse, but is applicable to a game like Yakuza as well. As the name suggests, it's the term for any action that will cancel, or stop short, some kind of animation, usually for an attack, and will instead play the animation for whatever action is used for the cancel. The quick-step cancel, for example, cancels a specific attack animation with a quick-step, which is Yakuza's name for the dodge button. Animation cancels are useful for shortening lengthy attack animations, either to allow you to get out of a committal attack if you're in a bad spot, or to continue pressure on an enemy without having to deal with ending frames on a specific attack. For Yakuza, this has the secondary benefit of resetting your combo. In fighting games, in most cases, you can throw out whatever move you want whenever, with the exception of some input attacks. You're not forced to do some random punch attack before doing a certain kick. For my Smash players out there, you're not forced to do an up air before you can throw out an F-tilt. Yakuza has a more linear system, where you're forced to do certain parts of your combo before being able to use certain moves. For example, you cannot do 4ST without first doing 4S. Conversely, using 4S locks you out of using 3ST. Say that you're in this situation. Maybe you accidentally inputted 4S, but you wanted to use 3ST. What's the fastest way to reset your combo? By quick-step canceling out of the 4S and restarting your combo. Now, while the quick-step cancel in Yakuza 2 is somewhat limited, hence why I've been using Yakuza 3 footage, it does have use in this game and is still quite powerful. And by quite powerful, I mean it enables one advanced combo. What is it, you may ask? To fully understand this, we need to understand the concept of the back combo. It's very simple. If you hit an enemy in the front, they can block. If you hit an enemy in the back, they can't. Therefore, hitting them in the back constantly won't allow them to escape. This combo type technically exists in Yakuza 1, but it's impossible to capitalize off of it due to your low speed and lack of a quick-step cancel. Back combos exist in some form in nearly every game, so get used to hearing about them. In Yakuza 2, because of Kiryu's buffs, you can now link together a few things. Up to 4 light attacks, ST, 3S2T, sometimes 4ST and 2ST. I don't know, this stuff is very hard to find. Yakuza 2's quick-step cancel is limited to only light attacks, so you can't cancel out of finishers. The thing about this though is that it hinges on an equipable item called the Southpaw Bracelet, which causes specifically left-handed attacks to have more hit stun, making these combos possible. The most common finishers for this combo are either a bounding throw or a grab heat action. Bounding throws and heat action finishers will receive much more in-depth explanations in the next section. If you want to practice these combos for whatever reason, I recommend just doing it on Hayashi because he has a big health bar and he doesn't have the counterattack bullshit of Ryuji. Though I've also seen quite a few people go for combos on Joe Amon, and that's about all I have to say for Yakuza 2. It's a step in the right direction, but a baby step for sure. I can't rate it below a 5 out of 10 because it doesn't actively piss me off in any way, but it's still about as deep as a kiddie pool. This is another game where it feels much better and more natural to box rather than go for long, elaborate combos, but who knows? Maybe there's more to this game that I don't know about. Most of my knowledge comes from watching other people. Our next game, however, brings us a new console and more new combat options than I even know what to do with. Going over Yakuza 1 and 2 took 2-ish pages of script. Yakuza 3 took 8. Yakuza 3 may have the single highest discrepancy between standard and advanced combat. Most casual players really don't like the way this game feels due to the bugged enemy blocking, among other things. When it comes to advanced combos, however, many people, me included, absolutely love this game, and I hope I'm able to explain why. Before diving in, it's worth noting that this section will be covering the remastered version of Yakuza 3 instead of the PS3 original. Believe it or not, despite the remastered version being the exact same game, it's not. There are some key differences in the way some of this game's systems work between the two versions. For the most part, the tech that works in the remastered version also works in the PS3 version and vice versa, but any discrepancies will be noted. This all applies to Yakuza 4 and 5 when we get to those games as well. So, where do I even start with Yakuza 3? A lot of systems that appear in many future games really take form in this one, and among those is the back combo. While back combos were in Yakuza 1 and 2, they're much more impactful here, and there's a wider array of moves that can be used. Back combos still aren't as crazy as they get in future games though. Bosses in Yakuza 3 are much easier to knock down than in Yakuza 2, with an asterisk. When I'd say we talk about boss properties, now is the time. Bosses in this game have two main states, the normal state and the knockdown immunity state. Bosses will start out in the normal state and will gain knockdown immunity upon entering heat mode. A boss in the normal state will be affected by moves just like any normal enemy, and a boss with knockdown immunity will take reduced hit stun and cannot be knocked down by normal means. Now, all of these rules that I just outlined have like 80 billion asterisks, and let's go through them one by one. Bosses in this game have two main states, the normal state and the knockdown immunity state. This is generally true, though there are a few big exceptions with Mine and Joamon, who both have third super armor states where they will not take any hit stun. Oops, I also forgot to put that technically Joji and Kanda also have super armor states. Joji is specifically when he's idle, and Kanda's kind of just flips on and off throughout the fight. Bosses will start out in the normal state and will gain knockdown immunity upon entering heat mode. Alongside the bosses with the aforementioned third states, notable exceptions are Majima 1, Rikia, and Richardson 1 and 2, who do not have heat modes and therefore do not leave the normal state. Kanda is also an exception, though for a different reason. Kanda also has knockdown immunity that toggles depending on what part of the fight you're in. Now, what makes him so special? It's quite simple, really. Kanda is fat. Fat enemies natively have knockdown immunity, though like any instance of knockdown immunity, it can be bypassed with the right techniques. Additionally, setting the game to easy difficulty will remove knockdown immunity from bosses outright, though most players don't do this. A boss in the normal state will be affected by moves just like any normal enemy. There are two major exceptions to this. One is ST. Certain acrobatic bosses, namely Joji and Mine, and also Lao Kalong specifically in his unarmed phase, can literally just tech ST because they feel like it. Couldn't tell you why they made this happen for this and only this move. The other exception is your backward quickstep attack. Normally, this attack will cause an enemy to enter a daze. Small tangent, this is a daze, and this is a parry stun. What's the difference? A daze allows you to do this heat action, and a parry stun allows you to do this heat action. Anyways, bosses are normally immune to being dazed, and will instead just use the quote-unquote weak gut stun animation, which is the one that plays when you try to land a gut stun on an enemy with knockdown immunity. They will still be stunned for a short time, though they won't fall to the ground and won't enter a knockdown state. And a boss with knockdown immunity will take reduced hit stun and cannot be knocked down by normal means. This one's only sort of a lie. The Southpaw bracelet makes its return from Yakuza 2 and allows you to slightly expand the array of moves you can use in a back combo on an enemy with knockdown immunity. And by slightly, I mean that without the Southpaw bracelet, you can only use S2T, while having the Southpaw bracelet allows you to do 3 S2T. I also want to explain what I mean by being unable to be knocked down by normal means. While your finishers can knock down a boss with knockdown immunity, it is possible to bypass this immunity in 5 main ways. 1. Grabs and command grabs. The most simple way to bypass knockdown immunity is with a grab. Is what I would say if grabs were at all consistent. Generally, bosses with knockdown immunity really don't like being grabbed. Your most consistent option is your standard throw, which may require you to mash circle. Your square and triangle options tend to work far less often. Even then, if you grab a boss too much, they'll just immediately break out. And some of them even have preset grab counters, so that's not even an option. If you do manage to throw a boss, then they're already on the ground, and their immunity is reset, so it doesn't really get you anywhere. If you find yourself in this situation, look no further than to your bounding throws. Bounding throws are special command grabs that you can perform by pressing circle after a finisher. Most of these are pretty useless for combos and have the same issue of immediately putting the enemy on the ground, but one of your bounding throws, namely 2STC, has a specific property to it that gives it a few decent use cases in this context. More on that later. 2. Lotus Flare Fist. Lotus Flare Fist is an attack you can use by holding down the heavy attack button for a very long time. And I mean a very long time, like 4 or 5 seconds. Because of this long charge time, it has very few use cases, but it will immediately cause a gut stun on an enemy even if they have knockdown immunity. It can really only be used on Lao Kalong in his heat mode and on Kanda though. 3. Shoulder grabs. If an enemy is lying on the ground and you're facing their top half, it's possible to press the grab button to pick them off the ground and place them on their feet. If you do this on a normal enemy, or a boss on easy difficulty, they will be put in a daze. But on a boss on normal or above, they will get right back to attacking as if nothing happened. So why even bother doing this then? Well, when an enemy is picked up off the ground, you actually have frame advantage, with an asterisk, and the enemy will very briefly be in a sort of phantom knockdown state. And if you attack as soon as you become actionable, you can instantly knock them down. Now, about that asterisk, this tech is one of the things that got hit the hardest in the remastered version. This tech is rather consistent on the PS3 version, but is nearly impossible in the remastered version. Oftentimes you just won't have frame advantage at all, and picking an enemy up is pretty much useless. At best, you'll get a back combo, but oftentimes the enemy will just turn around and block you. I've had it happen, so it's not impossible on the remastered edition, but the chances of this tech working in the remaster are insanely low. So I wouldn't rely on this unless you're playing the PS3 version. 4. Grab releases. If an enemy grabs you, and you mash out of the grab, the enemy will also be in this phantom knockdown state for a short period of time. The amount of time varies depending on the type of grab, but the most consistent type is the tackle grab that Rikiya and Kanda use, though it is still possible on other grab types. Thankfully, this is also still possible in the remaster. 5. Parries. Komaki Parry also puts enemies into this phantom knockdown state in the short amount of time between the enemy getting parried and entering the parry stun. You have just barely enough time to hit the enemy before this happens. It's not 100% consistent and is somewhat position dependent, but it still works a good amount of the time. It even works almost 100% of the time on large enemies. So, what does this have to do with back combos? Not much. Sorry. The most advanced that back combos get in this game requires discussing this game's quick-step cancel. It has been improved from Yakuza 2, with another asterisk. You can now quick-step out of first finishers, but not your second ones. This doesn't really matter for back combos, but what does matter is the fact that you can only do a quick-step cancel while not in heat mode. So while it is technically possible to infinitely loop your rush combo on an enemy's back by quick-step canceling the fourth light attack, doing a left or right quick-step attack, and then repeating, this stops as soon as you go into heat mode. However, there's an item called the Calming Towel that prevents you from gaining heat, so you can slap it on and back combo loop to your heart's content. with an asterisk. The Calming Towel will come back up again later. For right now, that's pretty much all I have to say for back combos. They still don't bring that much to the table. So what's next? Well, this game has two other kinds of combos, wall bounding and knockdown combos. These two are related but distinct, despite the fact that the community tends to call them the same thing. Knockdown combo is a term I came up with to hopefully remedy what I consider a glaring nomenclature issue. What's the problem exactly? Well, this is a wall bound. There's a wall, and the enemy is bounding off of it. Makes sense? Checks out. According to the community, this is also a wall bound, despite there being no wall involved and the enemy not bounding off of anything. Yes, these two combo types can naturally flow in and out of each other, but they are still quite different. I would first like to discuss wall bounding. Wall bounds are a step up from back combos, as you can basically use any move you want as long as you're in the right spot. When an enemy is hit while in a knockdown state or by a move that puts them into a knockdown state, the game checks to see if they are near a wall. If they are, whatever hit animation they are in will be overridden by the wallbound animation, with the exception of a gut stun. If an enemy is hit back into the wall while in the wallbound animation, the animation will reset. Reset the animation enough times, however, and a different animation will play where the enemy falls to their knees. By this point, it is very difficult to continue a wallbound due to this animation being much shorter and forcing you to use lower hitting attacks. An enemy must be fully upright and actionable before the primary wallbound animation is used again. For example, if you trigger the secondary animation and then immediately gut stun an enemy when they try to get up, any wallbounding you do will still use the secondary animation. Wallbounds are fairly short, but are very useful, and often have a much wider array of heat action finishers, though this usually boils down to landing a gut stun and doing a grab heat action. Where things start to get really crazy though is with knockdown combos. To understand knockdown combos fully, we need to understand what makes them work in the first place. When an enemy is hit while in a knockdown state, they will do one of two things depending on what attack they are hit with. If the enemy is hit with an attack that does not knock them down, like a light attack for example, they will play one of two designated knockdown animations, either the rollover or the faceplant. There's a slight difference, and the rollover might be a tiny bit better, but it's not a significant difference at all. Alternatively, if an enemy is hit with a move that does knock them down, like a finisher, they will play the animation associated with that attack. There are two exceptions to this rule. One involves your forward quickstep attack when you have the steel shoulder guards equipped. This causes your forward quickstep attack to knock down enemies with the long tumble animation used by 4ST. When used in a knockdown, however, it'll play the faceplant animation like it normally does. The second exception relies on a specific tech that will be explained later. Going back to attacks that knock down, this crucially includes the gut stun from 2ST, which makes a lot of wall bounding and knockdown stuff possible in the first place. There's one problem with this though. The designated knockdown animations send the enemy really far away, much farther than you can hit them. Worse yet, if they hit a wall, now you're dealing with a wall bound and can't capitalize off of your knockdown, so it's not like you can just push them up against a wall in order to do so. But what if I told you, not every wall is a wall? By that, I mean, not every vertical surface with collision is a wall. In Yakuza, for something to be a wall, it has to be specifically coded as such. If a wall is not coded as a wall, two notable things will happen. A, you can't do wall heat actions, and B, an enemy in a knockdown state will not bound. These kind of pseudo-walls can be found in places with really tight corners, on invisible walls, on walls that are curved, on stairs, or on railings, among other things. Basically, if a wall is not perfectly flat and straight, there's a good chance it's a pseudo-wall. Now, pseudo-walls aren't the only thing we need here. Say that you're fighting Joji and you get to a second arena around the stripper pole. The entire outer edge of the arena is a pseudo-wall. But if you try to knockdown combo him on it, he will slowly slide away from you and escape the combo. So how do we remedy this? Well, what would happen if you found a place where two pseudo-walls intersect? What would happen if we found the fabled pseudo-corner? Pseudo corners are your most powerful tool in this game, as they allow knockdown combos to truly shine. Here's a list of the best pseudo corners on every major boss in the game. Majima 1. The corners of this elevator section are pseudo corners. Rikiya. The area where these signs are is a pseudo corner, though you may have to remove the signs for it to work properly. Tamashiro 1. The corners on either side of his desk are pseudo corners. Hasebe. The area between this couch and this dresser is a pseudo corner. Richardson 1 does not have a pseudo corner. Kanda. This corner by the flower pot is a pseudo corner, though you do have to remove some furniture beforehand. Alternatively, the ledge above the pool can work as well. Majima 2 does not have a pseudo corner. Lao Kalong does not have a pseudo corner. Joji. The corners of the booths in Phase 1 are pseudo corners, though Phase 2 does not have a pseudo corner at all. Tamashiro 2 and Richardson 2 both do not have pseudo corners. Richardson 3. There's a small pseudo corner between the reception desk and this cabinet. And Mine. Either corner on the edge of the roof is a pseudo corner, and Daigo is also a pseudo corner. Great, so now we know where to do knockdown combos. What can we do in them? Well, I think it's good to start by outlining all of the moves you can use in your rush combo and how exactly they can be applied to your combos, starting with ST and S2T. These attacks have the distinction of being the only finishers you can do in a back combo on an enemy with knockdown immunity, but they aren't super applicable in other situations. ST has another decent use case in wall bounds where the ST bounding throw is a good finisher because it's quick enough and hits low enough to catch enemies in the secondary animation, but its use in knockdown combos is quite limited. Like I said, some bosses will just ignore ST outright, and it can only be used in a combo on large enemies. S2T can be used on normal-sized enemies, and the specific animation can be followed up on, but it is rather inconsistent. 2ST and 2S2T. As you may have been able to tell, 2ST is the glue that holds all of this together. The gut stun animation is incredibly useful, as it not only allows you to grab an enemy in a knockdown state, but it also gives you time to do other actions such as pulling out a weapon or opening the menu. And yes, accessing the menu mid-combo is very important for one major reason, which I will outline after this section. Alongside being very useful during combos, inflicting a gut stun is also the best way to begin a wall bound or knockdown. 2S2T isn't nearly as impactful. It's a very nondescript finisher, and its only combo use is in a knockdown combo where it has the same consistency issues as S2T. 3ST and 3S2T. 3ST is a very good finisher all around. It's possible to use in a back combo on enemies with knockdown immunity if you use the Southpaw bracelet like I said, and its bounding throw is sometimes used as a finisher in wall bounds, but it really shines in knockdown combos. 3ST and 3S2T are basically just better versions of ST and S2T. No bosses are immune to 3ST, and 3S2T is far more consistent in knockdown combos. It's worth noting that 3ST must be quickstep cancelled into a quickstep attack in order to continue the combo, though I did have one instance where I was able to continue a combo without quickstep attacking. Now, while you can't quickstep cancel double finishers, 3S2T applies a new hit animation that I haven't discussed yet, the low bounce. The low bounce is a very lengthy animation, which allows you to follow up on this specific finisher. Because the enemy is very low to the ground, you have to do a low hitting attack. This often means just using a side quickstep attack, which hits much lower than you might expect. There is one restriction placed on the low bounce, however, as it can only be used a maximum of 3 times in one combo. If you try to do it a 4th time, the enemy will play a separate animation where they immediately warp to the ground, thus ending the combo. This follows the same resetting rules as wall bounding, where the enemy must be fully actionable again before this counter resets. 4ST and 4S2T. If you want to use 4ST in a knockdown, you may have to slightly delay 4S or it may whiff. 4ST applies a tumble animation, which, with proper timing, allows you to quickstep backwards and do the standing heavy kick. This kick causes a low bounce, which allows you to continue the combo. 4S2T is a big flip kick that also causes a low bounce, though there's not much else to it. It's basically just a different version of 3S2T. With the rush combo out of the way, I'd like to discuss some other moves that you may use in a knockdown combo. First, while I've already discussed the bounding throws, you may have noticed that I neglected to mention one, specifically 2STC. The reason I didn't mention this one is because it has the distinction of being the only bounding throw that can be comboed out of. If you use this throw in a combo, you can do one of two things. You can use a heavy kick, which is quite inconsistent and eats a low bounce, but is easier. Or you can go for a side quick-step attack, which is much more consistent, but is more difficult due to requiring precise timing. This does bring up a bit of an issue though. In order to do most of your combos, you need to have the Calming Towel equipped, which stops you from gaining heat so that you always have access to your quick-step cancel. If you want to use a bounding throw or do a heat action, you need heat. So how do you do a bounding throw and a knockdown combo then? The answer is mid-combo menuing. As I stated earlier, if you inflict an enemy with a gut stun, then you have enough time to open the menu and equip or unequip the Calming Towel. Want to use a bounding throw in your combo or looking to do a heat action finisher? Gut stun, unequip the Calming Towel, then build up enough heat. Want to continue a combo without building heat? Gut stun, equip the Calming Towel, and continue comboing. It's also possible to use some weapons in combos. The three that you'll usually see are knives, tonfas, and knuckles. Knives and tonfas generally use the light combo as well as the pull-out hitboxes, or even the put-away hitbox for the tonfa. Knuckles have their own mini moveset that you can do a lot with, and I encourage you to experiment. So is that all for Yakuza 3? No, it's not. I haven't even gone over the single biggest piece of tech that this game has to offer. Let me ask you, how would you like to double the amount of moves you have to work with? Now, how is that even possible? Well, every part of your rush combo, barring double finishers, has a reversal attack attached to it. If you do a move behind you instead of in front, you will perform a different attack. If you try to do this in a combo though, well, you're just attacking away from the enemy that you're trying to hit, so what gives? Well, if you very quickly flick your control stick back and forth during an attack animation, and then press the attack button of your choice, all of a sudden, your reversal attack will get reversed and can be used in a combo. Now, a lot of these reversals aren't significantly different from their normal counterparts, especially for the finishers, but some of them do have key differences which I will go over. 1. Single reverse light attacks. These are very similar to regular light attacks, they just have unique animations. However, 4SRS has a unique and weird property. Just to clarify, in condensed notation, RS is read as reverse square and stands for a reverse light attack input. This also applies to RT, which is reverse triangle, and is a reverse finisher input. 4ST and 4SRT are essentially the same attack and have near identical animations. The reason I bring them up while talking about 4SRS is because using 4SRS changes both 4ST and 4SRT. Instead of causing the tumble animation like normal, hitting an enemy with 4ST after using 4SRS will apply the faceplant animation instead. Using 4S2T after this will cause it to not apply the low bounce animation and will prematurely end a combo. I can only assume that this is a glitch. 2. Double reverse light attacks. Double reverse light attacks work a little differently than normal and single reverse light attacks. They are performed by doing the reversal tech input twice in a row, selecting light attack each time. While they are performed using the light attack button, they function more similarly to finishers. If used on a standing enemy, they will be knocked down. You cannot quickstep out of them even without heat, and you cannot do a finisher after them. Thankfully, these attacks all have fairly small in-lag, so they can still be used in knockdowns even with heat. 3. Reverse finishers. Despite the slightly altered animations, reverse finishers have basically the same properties as their normal counterparts, with one big exception being 2SRT. It has a completely different animation from 2ST, and is basically just a straight upgrade. It's still fairly slow, but it's much safer and has much more range. The only downside is that you can't do a bounding throw from reverse finishers. Hey, sorry to interrupt, I'll make this quick, but do you remember when I said that I found out why you can sometimes convert off of 3ST without quickstep canceling? Yeah, it's because if you do 3ST after 3SRS instead of just 3S, it's actionable sooner? What? Having explained the reversal tech, I think that's finally it for all of the main combo tech in Yakuza 3. There's a lot more stuff that I could discuss, but I think this section has gone on for long enough. If you want to get into the nitty gritty, go watch Cone. He's far and away the best Yakuza 3 player out there, and he does stuff that I can't even fathom. Now that we know how to start and maintain a combo, how do we end it? Well, the basic answer is heat actions, but you can't just throw out whatever heat action you want whenever. They have specific requirements. and I think this is where Yakuza 3 falters a little bit. Your options for heat action finishers are very limited in this game. Simply put, it's basically impossible to do any kind of heat action while an enemy is in a knockdown state. So in order to do a heat action, we have to put them in a different state. So what are our options? Well, the most simple one is to just let the enemy fall to the ground so that you can do one of a couple ground heat actions. This is definitely an option, but it's not all that exciting. Another option is to gut stun and then grab the enemy. Grabbing gives you plenty of heat actions to work with, though with the way that knockdown combos work, you'll always have the enemy grabbed from the back. This works sometimes, but I find that some bosses really don't like being grabbed out of a knockdown, and will often just immediately break out. So you can try that, but no guarantees. You know why most of my combos are on Joji or Mine? Well, it's because of that little ST trick that I just showed you. Despite how quick this animation is, you do still have frame advantage, and the boss is technically in a neutral standing state at the end of the animation. As such, if you time it just right, you can use heat actions that require the boss to be standing right as they finish the animation. It's still not a perfect solution, but it does allow for some creativity in finishing heat actions. And to finally finish Yakuza 3's combat, I'd like to discuss what bosses are best to do combos on. Well, it's pretty obvious after what I just talked about. Joji and Mine are the best because they have good corners and an expanded set of possible finishers due to the ST tech. Neither of these bosses are perfect though. Joji is nice because he can be accessed immediately out of a save, but his arena change does mess with things, since his Phase 2 arena lacks a pseudo corner. Mine has the same problem of being at the very end of a long battle, and heat phases can get in the way of you trying to land combos. Otherwise, these are still your best options. Honorable mention goes to Richardson 3, as despite him having a very small pseudo corner and having the same long battle issues as Mine, he's the only main story boss with the large body type, which allows for some expanded combos. He even has a unique tech that allows you to Tiger Drop his get up attack, which leads into a knockdown combo. And I think that's finally it for Yakuza 3. I personally really love this one, but I can see how it's not everyone's cup of tea. The reversal tech is really weird to get used to, especially when you're doing it over and over again in a combo, but I think it's a very rewarding tech to learn. Overall, I really like the feel of this game, and I feel like they really had it nailed down with knockdown combos, while wall bounding and back combos are nice additions to keep things fresh. If I had to summarize how these combo types change moving forward, I'd say that each one is like a celebrity that takes very different paths in life. Back combos start out very humble but continue to grow and evolve over the years, and eventually rise up to the top. Wall bounds are like the popular celebrity that lost everything after becoming a drug addict and eventually become a shell of their former self. Knockdown combos are like the celebrity that everyone loves who tragically dies in a car accident early on in their career. Everyone is sad they're gone, but at least we never had to see them fall off. That being said, Yakuza 4, our next game, changes some things around, but is still pulling a lot from the systems that Yakuza 3 pioneered. So with that said, let's get to it. Yakuza 4, while running on almost the exact same version of this engine as Yakuza 3 with some very minor tweaks, of course has 3 new characters in Akiyama, Saejima, and Tanimura, each with their own movesets and combat tech. Luckily, despite the quadrupled character count, I won't have to explain nearly as much since Yakuza 4 builds off of the systems present in Yakuza 3. But despite being so similar to Yakuza 3, there are a few universal changes that do matter, including one which I argue drastically changes Kiryu's combat for the worse. We'll talk about that one in a minute. I say that we should start in the order that you play as the protagonist though, which means we'll be starting off with Akiyama. Akiyama is a very fast kick-based fighter, and he has what I and many others consider to be the best combat in the game. There's no need to go over combo types, so let's begin with Akiyama's standard combo, ST and S2T. ST is Akiyama's gut-stunning attack. You don't need me to tell you that this attack is really good, especially since it has such an enormous hitbox. S2T is essentially just a worse version of Kiryu's S2T though. It's not applicable in any kind of combo outside of this one very specific setup that I found while gathering footage, which involves using it right out of a front stun. That universal change I was talking about that drastically affects Kiryu, It applies to other protagonists as well, the change being that it is no longer possible to inflict a gut stun on an enemy that is in a knockdown state. I understand why they made this change. If they didn't, this would be possible. But it's significantly worse in some aspects of the combat. At least for Akiyama, he's fast enough that he doesn't even care, and he can even quick-step cancel while in heat mode. But because of the gut stun change, there's nothing really special about ST either in a wallbound or a knockdown. Unlike Kiryu though, nearly all of Akiyama's basic attacks are usable in a back combo on an enemy with knockdown immunity. 2ST and 2S2T. 2ST applies whatever I'm supposed to call this. By the 9 I'm tweaking. Whatever it is, it does it. One thing about this attack is that on some bosses, using it will cause them to do a retaliation attack. Sometimes. It can be very inconsistent. This technically existed in Yakuza 3, but only on Majima. This retaliation attack can be used to your advantage. During a knockdown combo, the boss will do the retaliation attack away from you, sometimes, and it's also possible for the boss to just tech the attack outright. This attack has a deceptively large hitbox, so it's advised to back up to avoid getting hit, but you can continue hitting the boss after this attack to either put them back into a knockdown, or you can do a heat action. More on that later. As for 2S2T, it's another pretty useless double finisher. 3ST and 3S2T. 3ST is the weakest of your finishers. It applies the tumble property, which will activate the retaliation attack very consistently, but even if you want that to happen, its hitbox is so small that it has trouble hitting during a knockdown, so you have to delay it slightly. It's not worth using most of the time. If you do manage to land it and not activate the retaliation attack though, 3S2T is not a bad move. It doesn't have any special properties, but it has short enough in lag to be comboed out of, though I can't overstate how unlikely this is to happen outside of a boss without the retaliation ability. 4ST, 4S2T, and 4S3T. Akiyama here has our first instance of a triple finisher. Each of these final finishers are actually quite good. 4ST is very fast and is your best finisher to use out of a retaliation attack knockdown reset. 4S2T applies the low bounce property, which is always nice, and it's quick step cancelable. And 4S3T applies the tumble animation. Yes, this means that it causes the retaliation attack, but the tumble seems to cause it much more consistently, and despite not being a single finisher, 4S3T is also quick step cancelable, making it much safer. Just beware that it can whiff, and each time you use it forces you to use a low bounce. Before moving on, it's also worth noting that if you continue to press light attack after using 4S, Akiyama will continue to kick up to a certain point. Doing a heavy attack at any point during this will lead into 4ST, and is perfectly usable in any kind of combo. Now, as for other moves you may use, I'll start with your quick step attacks. These function very similarly to Kiryu's. The forward and back attacks literally copy his animations, but there's a couple changes that I do want to discuss. Akiyama's side quick steps have new animations. These don't hit quite as low as Kiryu's, so while they're still usable, they're much less forgiving. Akiyama's forward quick step attack is the same as Kiryu's, but due to Akiyama's rush combo hitting lower, it's possible to use it in a knockdown without dropping the combo. There are two other moves that I'd like to highlight, being his standing heavy kick and his running attack. Akiyama's heavy kick is a two-part attack that causes a normal faceplant. The first hit is quick step cancelable if you so desire, but the second hit is fast enough to be followed up on as well. His running attack can also be used in a combo if you're fast enough. The best way to land it is by quick stepping out of 4S2T, as the low bounce gives you ample time to set up the running attack. The first two hits have no special property but are quick step cancelable, and the third hit causes a low bounce. A small honorable mention goes to counter kick, which can be used against a retaliation attack in a combo, and it will cause the attack to reset. Before moving on to combo finishers, I have one more thing to discuss. Akiyama is able to harness the power of the reversal tech from Yakuza 3, though not nearly to the same extent as Kiryu. Akiyama does not have double reversed light attacks, and his reverse finishers are basically identical to the normal versions, apart from ST, which actually gets a little worse, as it now cannot gut stun enemies and will only cause the weak gut stun animation. Akiyama's reversals also function a little differently to Kiryu's. Akiyama's light attacks actually count for his rush combo. For example, if Kiryu did 2 light attacks, 1 reversal attack, and then a finisher, he would do 2ST. If Akiyama does the same inputs, he does 3ST. Other than this, it works the exact same way to Kiryu. A few notes about Akiyama's reversal attack aside from the aforementioned SRT nerf are as follows. Akiyama's SRS and 2SRS both slide him really far, so you need to be in a really tight corner for them to work consistently. Even then, SRS has a lot of trouble hitting in a knockdown due to a bad hitbox. 3SRT is ever so slightly slower than 3ST, which means that it will hit in a knockdown without having to delay it like 3ST. It still doesn't work 100% of the time though due to the thin hitbox. Now, as for heat actions, like I said, the best way to set up a heat action is to cause a boss to do their retaliation attack, which leaves them standing. Bosses are much more forgiving about being grabbed out of a combo after a retaliation attack, so grab heat actions are very much on the table this time around. A lot of Akiyama's unarmed heat actions require the enemy to specifically try to attack him, so it's hard to do some of them, but I have been able to get the guard break heat action before, and it's also possible to get the essence of Loin Reaver with good positioning and timing. As always, weapon heat actions are also an option. So who do you do these on? Well, Akiyama's boss selection is rather limited, but the ones he does have work fairly well. Ihara has no retaliation attack, low health, and a hard to reach pseudo corner due to the objects, though the ultimate match version of this fight removes all the objects, so if you want a boss with no retaliation attack, this is your best option. Midorikawa is also just not an option due to the super armor, but Minami and Arai are both good picks. Minami can be accessed from a save and has good pseudo corners right here, and Arai is the first boss of the finale and has good corners here and here. Heat modes in Yakuza 4 work a bit differently to Yakuza 3, as they vary a lot more in how they function. Ihara doesn't have a heat mode, Minami has 2 levels of heat, but neither of them give him knockdown immunity, and Arai also has 2 levels, but only his red heat mode will give him knockdown immunity. I believe that's everything I have on Akiyama, so next is Saejima, and this section probably won't be long. Saejima is the tank character, and as such, he is quite slow, the enemy of good combos. This, on top of the fact that he lacks a quick-step cancel, severely limits his combo ability. But there's still a bit that he does have, and he has some cool tech to mitigate some of his weaknesses. So let's begin with his basic combo. ST. A lot of Saejima's moves have the problem of almost being really good for combos, but having one big flaw that drags them down. In the case of ST, its fatal flaw is its terrible hitbox. On paper, ST would be Saejima's best move for initiating a knockdown, but if you try to hit an enemy with it out of a back combo, much of the time it'll just miss at point blank. If you do manage to hit it, it will cause the by the item tweaking effect, which gives you enough time to follow up. Yes, this means that it will activate retaliation attacks sometimes, but we'll take what we can get. 2ST. This is a very unremarkable finisher. It's fast, but that's about it. It causes the enemy to faceplant, which immediately ends any knockdown combo, and it has so much in-lag that it's difficult to use in a wallbound. Next, 3ST. This is Saejima's gut stun finisher. This would be really good, but it has so much in-lag that you can only follow up with a grab or a heavy kick. Not much else to say for this one. S-Charge T and S-Charge TT. Saejima's main gimmick is that he has the ability to charge his finishers, which have completely changed animations, are much stronger, and also have double and sometimes even triple finishers, at the cost of being even slower than his standard finishers. His first charge finisher is quite special, as it applies a unique hit effect, and innately bypasses any knockdown immunity. The effect in question is the high bounce, which, as you can guess, is just a low bounce, but higher. I'm not sure if this has the same 3 bounce limit as the low bounce, but it also doesn't really matter as there is no situation in which you can land a high bounce more than once in a combo. S-Charge T is too slow to be used in any kind of combo, but it can set up combos, and is especially useful for its ability to bypass knockdown immunity. S-Charge TT is the double finisher, which has a surprisingly low amount of in-lag, so it is possible to follow up with some attacks. 2S-Charge T and 2S-Charge TT. 2S-Charge T is another gut stun inflicting attack, but seeing as it is a charge attack, it is too slow to use in any combo outside of a wallbound. It does have less in-lag than 3ST, but it's still less useful once again due to its lack of speed. 2S-Charge TT isn't too special of a move. It's very quick, but causes a tumble, so watch out for the retaliation. 3S-Charge T, 3S-Charge TT, and 3S-Charge T2T. These specific finishers are the ones that were most meant to be used all at once. 3S Charge T and 3S Charge T2T both have next to no combo potential due to their end lag. 3S Charge TT is the only one with some additional use, which we will get to later. This is the only charge finisher combo that can be used during a knockdown, however, so it does get some bonus points. It does require you to release the attack as soon as it finishes charging, so you do need to time it properly. As for the additional moves you may use, there are a handful with some good utility. Similarly to Kiryu, Saijima's standing charged heavy has 2 stages. Unlike Kiryu though, the first stage is the more useful one. The spinning Beyblade attack causes the I'll stop calling it that. It causes the fallover effect, which can be used to either get the enemy on the ground, or it can set up a wall bound. In a similar vein, Saijima's charged heavy grab attack is good for wall bounds, though not every boss likes being grabbed. Saijima's running attack is often used as a finisher, specifically for its command grab ability. This running attack can be done after a gut stun, after S charge TT, or out of a wall bound, and it will put the enemy on the ground for a ground heat action if you wish to do that. While Saijima's combos are often short and really nothing crazy, he does have some interesting stuff when it comes to his heat action finishers. He of course has a good few grab heat actions, which are always nice, but there are a few more which he can implement into his combos. Wall bounding is arguably most important for Saijima, as it's the most flexible combo type for him due to its forgiving follow-up windows. This is exemplified by the fact that he also has a heat action specifically for landing a wall bound, which can be used if you so desire. He also has a heat action that can be used on a bouncing enemy. This is mostly used after S charge T, but it's also possible to use it out of a low bounce. The only move Saijima has that causes a low bounce is 3S charge TT, but if you don't input the next finisher, and instead quickly flick the stick back and forth, sort of like the reversal tech, Saijima will be in a normal standing state and can use the clothesline heat action. If you remember that this finisher can be used in a knockdown, then technically this heat action can be used as a combo finisher. So what about bosses? Saijima has a pretty fair selection, but many of them have one or more problems. Saito 1 has low health, and Saito 2 has a group, plus both of them are in a long battle, so it's less than ideal. Kiryu is a very bad boss for combos all around. His heat modes make him hard to combo, his moveset is very difficult to deal with, and his arena is very bad, having no walls or good corners. Ivan is decent. He's in the arena, which means everything is a wall and they're all very close together. He can also be accessed easily from a save, and is the only boss with the large body type, which makes some combos more lenient. He does have low health though, so beware. Minami has decent health and an okay arena, but you do have to fight a ton of enemies before him, so it's not recommended. Majima is difficult to combo due to his speed and large arena. There's no corners, and you're constantly on a race against time due to the spinning Beyblade of Death attack. This is actually an unintentional oversight in the remastered edition. In the PS3 version, Majima moves at half the speed of the remaster. In the remaster, this move is absolutely 100% impossible to avoid. If you're going for a no damage, the accepted strategy is to kill Majima as fast as possible before he pulls out the Beyblade attack. The last boss is Kido, who is probably your best bet, but he still isn't perfect. His arena has no walls, but he has some good corners. He is in heat mode for the majority of the fight though. Kido does have a unique tech, however. His running attack has such a bad hitbox that you can charge an S charge T away from him, then turn it around and hit him without taking damage, which lets you set up a combo. And this is where Saijima's section was supposed to end before I flew a little too close to the sun, let's say. Beware, because a lot of the stuff that I just said in this section is going to be obsolete, and from here on, things are going to get freaky. Now, all of this is off the cuff, so it's not scripted. This is just me trying to make sense of all of the stuff that Cone, the GOAT, has so graciously given to me in the form of the Eldritch Forgotten Saijima tech. Well, first of all, I found out that Saijima is apparently the most broken, bugged, and simultaneously the most complex and technically demanding character in the entire game, all because of one thing. But before we get to that one thing, there is another thing I need to talk about. So, My only guess as to why this works is just like leftover scrapped mechanics that still have code that sort of kind of works, or it's like a dev thing. I have no idea, but apparently Saejima has just new finishers that just aren't used. If you go to do ST, for example, and as soon as you let go of the heavy attack button, you press X, you'll just do what looks like your charged finisher without charging at all. But it's not your charged finisher because this is not S charge T, this is STX. What's the difference? Well, I mean, you don't have to charge it, of course, but also there's a different hit effect. S charge T does the high bounce, STX does the low bounce. What? It's kind of the same idea with 3S Charge T and 3S TX. 3S Charge T does this like high launch, and 3S TX does a low launch. 2S TX and 2S Charge T are basically the same thing though, they both do gut stun. Crucially, you cannot do the double finishers though, you can only do the single ones, so it's not quite as useful as you might think. Where things get really freaky though is the relatively recent discovery, which I'm just now finding out about, of charge canceling and charge storage. For whatever godforsaken reason, if you go to do S charge T as Saejima, and as soon as you let her rip, you press the light attack button again, Saejima will cancel the charge and just do a normal light attack again. And this is a charge cancel. And while most of the weird shit comes with charge storage, which is an extension of this, charge canceling allows Saejima to have an infinite knockdown combo by repeatedly canceling the charge over and over again, even though this is like a really weird rhythm, and it's really freaky to use, and I don't like it. It's so odd to get used to, but here's a clip of Kon using it. It's basically just like, what if Saejima had Akiyama's kick flurry? It's so cursed, and I hate it. Now, charge storage is where things get bad. So basically, after doing a charge cancel, if you quickly tap triangle again, you'll notice that you do the charge finisher despite not charging anything. And unlike the pseudo-charged finisher things from earlier, these ones have the same properties as the normal ones, and you can do the double and triple finishers. And this makes it so that you can just use your charged finishers in a knockdown, and it completely revolutionizes Saejima's game plan. Now, that being said, the timing for the charge storage finishers is weird. I just don't know how to describe it other than weird. Half the time it just doesn't work. And it seems like you have to almost buffer the attacks, but even then that doesn't work part of the time. I don't know, all this is still very new to me, and I don't understand it at all. I just know that apparently he can do this, and theoretically this is like really, really good for him. Just so you know, I found out about these techs while I was editing the Akiyama section that you saw right before this one. So I didn't really have time to go back and write out and script an entire new part of the Saejima section for like this crazy new forgotten fucking in the Necronomicon we had to go look to find this type tech. Because I don't even understand how this is in the game. Like, it just negates Saejima's whole gimmick of charge finishers. Like, oh no, he can just do charge storage and he can do them whenever. So I believe Kon is going to be making a Yakuza 3 and 4 combat guide, which is going to be more in-depth than this video is for those games. Yes, even though the Yakuza 3 segment is like almost 30 minutes long, but yeah, it's going to be even more in-depth, and it'll go into stuff like charge storage and charge canceling and whatnot. So look out for that if you want to learn more about this. Okay, I think that's the end of this little mini unscripted segment. On to Tanimura. Our third character up is Tanimura, who is a very interesting case. Tanimura is somewhere in between Akiyama and Saejima in terms of combo utility. A lot of Tanimura's mechanics are prototypes of future ones. His parry would be iterated on in future entries, with Rush in Zero/Kiwami, Yakuza 6/Kiwami 2, and in Snake style. Tanimoto was the first to have heat actions tied to specific finishers, and was also the first to have a 5-hit rush combo. He has a lot of tools in his kit, but is held back somewhat by some strange weaknesses, and I'll go through them while discussing his rush combo. ST. Tanimoto's rush combo is actually quite simple on its own, as he has no double finishers, charged finishers, or reversals. His individual finishers do have some depth to them, however. Tanimoto's ST may very well be the best finisher in the entire game. We have another new hit effect to discuss, the Stumble. This animation essentially replaces the Gut Stun for Tanimoto, despite him having a finisher that applies it. An enemy in a Stumble can be grabbed just like in a Gut Stun, but a Stumble can be reapplied on an enemy in a bound or a knockdown. Beware though, if you hit an enemy with ST who is in a knockdown, they will be in a different Stumble animation, and when hit, will be put in a secondary faceplant animation that is much harder to convert off of, so it's not a straight up replacement for Yakuza 3's better Gut Stun. Either way, this Stumble effect is very useful, and is helped by the fact that this attack is very fast. 2ST. 2ST is another fast attack, but it suffers from very high end lag, not helped by the fact that Tanimoto completely lacks a quick step cancel. However, it is still possible to convert off of this attack in a knockdown using what might be the dumbest piece of tech in this entire series. Shout out to Cone for telling me about this one, but if you press the X button, or whatever your quickstep input is, just before the finisher lands, Tanimoto will just decide that the first actionable frame on his finisher will be much sooner. Even then, it's still not quite enough to use in a knockdown. You have to position it just right. The most consistent way I know of is to land your first light attack, aim your second light attack to the side so it whiffs and brings you just far away enough to get the latest hitbox of the finisher so that you can combo off of it. Even then, this doesn't work all of the time. 2ST also has a secondary use which allows you to convert off of the secondary Stumble animation in a knockdown. 2ST hits low enough to hit the enemy, and it will cause them to go into the turning knockdown animation, which lasts slightly longer than the standard one, but doesn't cause the enemy's hitbox to stick up as high. This is actually useful in this scenario, because with good timing, you can press triangle to do your heavy kick, at which point you can do a quick step attack to reset. Be careful though, too early and you'll do the heat action, too late and the enemy won't be hit by the kick. 3ST. 3ST is Tanimoto's Gut Stun finisher, and it's really nothing special. It's too slow to combo off of even with the quick step tech, and is mostly overshadowed by ST. 4ST. Somehow worse than 3ST, because you can at least use its heat action. I have no idea what Tanimoto is expecting trying to use this in a fight. It's way too slow to use in any context, even in a back combo. Damn. 5ST. A move with actual utility. It's fast enough to use in a back combo and a knockdown, though it has too many hits for a wallbound. It causes the standard knockdown animation, but has just a bit too much in lag to be comboed off of in a knockdown. Unless you use the quick step tech. This one's actually a lot more consistent than ST2, just be sure to delay the 5th light attack in order to land it. This one gets a thumbs up. A lot of Tanimoto's additional moves are highly derivative of Kiryu's. His quick step attacks, running attack, and standing kick are all the same as Kiryu's with slightly different animations, and because of this, they have very similar utility. Tanimoto's side quick step attacks don't hit quite as low as Kiryu's, so you do have a little less leeway with them. It is possible to convert off of his forward quick step attack in a knockdown similarly to Akiyama, as long as you do it in the beginning of a combo after ST. Tanimoto's parry is also his best way to set up combos. A parried enemy will immediately bound if parried into a wall, even if it's a pseudo wall. Recently, setups for using Tanimoto's reverse heavy attack in a combo were found as well, as it has low enough in lag to be comboed out of, though I haven't been able to replicate them. This is actually quite difficult. As for heat action finishers, the most obvious ones to use are Tanimoto's finisher heat actions. However, you cannot use these in a knockdown apart from 2ST's heat action after reapplying a stumble. It's still possible to land all of them on an enemy that's getting up though I'd say good luck with 4ST. Wall heat actions, grab heat actions, get up and ground heat actions are all on the table as well. Tanimoto also has a heat action that leaves an enemy dazed, which can even be used as a combo setup. As for bosses, there's Sugiyuchi, and that's it. Tanimoto's only other bosses are these mini-boss guys and Munakata, and they don't fit the bill at all. Sugiyuchi is pretty good, as he has good walls and pseudo corners, but you do have to be aware of his heat phase. where he gains knockdown immunity and becomes unparryable. So what about Kiryu? There are a grand total of 0, count 'em, 0 reasons to clip farm with Yakuza 4 Kiryu over Yakuza 3 Kiryu. Kiryu in Yakuza 4 is a straight downgrade. His moves are mostly the same from 3, so what's the issue? Well, the inability to restun enemies in a knockdown is the big one, which I already talked about, which guts your combo potential, pun not intended. Even if you could, good luck trying to do combos because the Calming Towel has been changed from Yakuza 3 to do absolutely fucking nothing. Even if, despite the giant nerfs that Kiryu received to his combo game, you still want to try and go for some, the only 1v1 boss he has with decent health and good pseudo corners is Daigo, who goes into heat mode very early on in the fight, which gives him knockdown immunity. And even later in the fight, he gains full-on super armor, making combos literally impossible. Do yourself a favor, just play Yakuza 3. So what do I think of Yakuza 4 as a whole? This game had some good stuff going for it with the new characters, but Saejima and Tanimura are not really fleshed out enough to have anything deep. Akiyama's a really nice addition with some cool stuff, but you really only play this game for him, as the aforementioned characters don't have much, and there is literally no reason to play Kiryu when Yakuza 3 exists. I still enjoy the core gameplay of Yakuza 4, but I really don't like its boss design outside of a handful of fights. At the end of the day though, it's still basically just diet Yakuza 3, so it can't be that bad, and I'd still give it a 7 out of 10. Savor how good we have it now. It's gonna get bad really quick. And that is the end of part 1 of the history of Yakuza combos. Before we get into the really crazy stuff that comes with some of the more modern games, I think it's good to go back and see how the series started, with Yakuza 1's relative lack of complexity, to Yakuza 2's fledgling combat tech, to Yakuza 3's new engine and explosion of complexity, to Yakuza 4's innovation and simultaneous regression. Next time we are going to cover Yakuza 5, 0, and Kiwami, but for now, I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.